I'm Dagny Forrest, a member of Painted Bride Quarterly's editorial and podcast teams. We're engaging in a little time travel with this episode, recorded back in December 2021. It features 3 poems by Oregon-based poet Lorna Rose and some healthy debate by our team, which resulted in 3 tiebreakers. Have a listen.
Hello, and welcome to the Painted Bride Quarterly Slush Pile. We're so glad that you're tuning in, turning on, clicking a button, whatever it is that makes you get here. Subscribe if you haven't, by the way. But so we're here to read some submissions to the magazine and discuss them and share our editorial process with you, our listeners. So read along at pbqmag.org. or just listen to our voices as we read these poems to you. And I'll start since I have the mic, as it were. I'm Kathleen Volk Miller, and I'm in an unusual place. I am house sitting for a friend of mine because contractors might be showing up. And she could no longer take any more days off because she's been COVID traced a couple times and had to use all of her sick days last week. She's not sick, thank goodness. But so I'm sitting in her home in case men show up to put in a gas fireplace. But it's pleasant and different. So here I am, and I'm going to bounce it to Jason. We'll stay in America this time. Hi, Jason.
Hi. I'm in my office in Tribeca in Manhattan. A lovely, lovely space. My school is still a ghost town.
Really?
I love being the only one here. It's so nice. It's actually, I mean, you take your pleasure where you can find it. And there's a certain sort of wonder to like not hearing other people's voices on the other sides of the wall and, being able to walk down. I mean, when I was at the Graduate Center, I used to do cartwheels in the hallway if there was no one around. But I'm not going to do that here because we have linoleum floors, and I'm not 20. It's not time to do that anymore.
The risk reward.
There's a risk, right? I mean, like the hand washing afterwards would now be far more intensive than it once was. Here I am in Manhattan, and I'm going to toss it back across the ocean to Marion, Wrenn.
I'm sorry, I'm stuck on doing cartwheels on the linoleum floors because if we are lucky to be in Philly at AWP, I think cartwheels might have to be a conference challenge
somewhere.
Right? Seriously.
I think I do not think it will take that many drinks before I start doing cartwheels.
Book fair, at the book fair, please.
At the book fair, please.
Oh, not at the book fair. Oh, yeah. I'll draw. No, because the whole pleasure is that you're doing something that draws huge amounts of attention to yourself, but you're doing it alone.
Oh, yeah.
That's the perversity of it that I take pleasure.
It's just the book fair is carpeted.
Right.
Oh,
no. Stay with me.
I tend to be sober during the book fair.
It's 3 a.m. in the hotel, the conference hotel. It's a cartwheel down the hallway. I think that's what's going to be our.
Okay,
have you booked your hotel yet?
That's the move.
What's up, babe?
Have you already planned? Have you planned your travel? I have not planned my travel yet.
I have not gotten that far. I'm going to talk to KVM soon about booking everything, but I have not gotten that far. So inshallah, we'll all see each other live and in person at AWP. But for now, I'm going to bounce it from here in the 50th year of the UAE celebrating National Day. Woo woo! To Alex in Long Island.
Hello, I'm in my apartment. Where I can spin around like a Maria in The Sound of Music and nobody can say anything. So do cartwheel. Hopefully I can still do cartwheels. I'm not sure. I have my parents' legs. Apparently they got that, like, just the knees are already like
I wondered what you meant. My parents' legs.
Yeah,
I think that's the title of the episode.
My parents' legs.
Well, my parents are both very short people, and there's no way I was growing past like 5'6". It just wasn't in the cards. It's like two
I'm
hobbits
5'6".
married each other. My mom's like 5.
Yeah, my mom was 5. How tall are you?
I'm like 5'4".
Oh, okay. Right. I am taller at 5'6", but
Yeah.
I just don't feel like it's that short. Like everyone thinks that when you're like 5'6", you're like this
I
tiny
know
person.
a lot of 6 feet people, I guess. Then I don't know.
I have height dysphoria. I think I'm taller than I am, unless I actually when I see myself in a mirror with like friends who are 6 feet tall, and I'm like, "Oh, you're taller than I am," and they're like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "I didn't know. Like I just didn't know." So I don't know. I just don't feel. I don't feel short. Is what I'm saying.
I'm the same, Jason. I am short and don't feel short.
Oh my God, I love you guys. You know what? I have to say how much I love the way we bring our bodies into the conversation about poetry.
Wait, are you tall? How tall are you, Marion?
Me, I'm 5'8", but with my hair, I look 6'2".
You know what they say, the higher the hair, the closer to God. So.
Amen. Amen, my brother. Amen. Alhamdulillah.
Harmony, how tall are you? You're small.
I'm 5'6".
Oh, nice.
I'm saying this is a perfectly reasonable height.
I met Harmony in real life after working with her for 2 years in different capacities. We had coffee together, and I still thought that you were. See, that's my height dysphoria. Yeah, we were same.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna hand. Well, we introduced Harmony. I also want to introduce Larissa as well over in Philly. Philly, right? Or
Yep.
near Philly.
Yep, still in Philly. I am also 5'6", but my Italian shrinking lady genes are finally kicking in. I'm all personality and shrinking by the minute, I think.
All right, maybe that's the episode title. Larissa's shrinking by the minute. It goes with the hoagie mouth. Right?
I really appreciate all of the homage. I'll take it because I could use the boost. But yeah, definitely shrinking. And I met somebody last week for the first time that I've only talked to online, on Zoom for the last 2 years. And he was short. He was very short. And I really expected him to be a lot taller. And it's funny, that's happened the last probably 2 times I just met people in real life.
Yeah.
And they were shorter than me. And that rarely happens. I'm rarely the tallest one in the group. So that made me feel better.
This is such a bizarre time. Much earlier when the weather was still nice in Philly, I taught one of my creative writing classes outside. And so everybody had their masks off. And they were literally like, we spent 10 minutes just looking at each other and giggling. Going, so that's what you look like. So that's what you after meeting for a few weeks, but masks off, everybody's faces were so different. I literally walked past them and didn't recognize them. The whole group was together.
I think more and more people have affirmed this phenomenon by which you actually make up a different face 100%. And you don't know that you're doing it 100%. Until you see their face and it's not the face you made up.
Yep.
And then you're like, oh my God, who are you? You've been replaced.
Yep. It's true.
I have no idea because he's meeting in person. And then I had to move the class to Zoom because I had some symptoms. And I'm fine, COVID negative. But oh my God, like I didn't know who anyone was. I had never seen anyone without their masks on.
Yep. That's what I'm talking about. Yep. Weird times. But I guess we should get to it, you guys. We have 3 poems here today, all from Lorna Rose. And we're very thrilled that she has given us the honor to share these on the show. And do I have a volunteer to read the first one? Marion? Yay.
I'll read. Yes, I'll read Leaving Libya. Yes, please. Let me make it a little bigger on my screen because Larissa's only shrinking genes are actually impacting my eyesight. Oh my Lord. Okay, so okay, here we go. Leaving Libya. I flood my lungs with the wet stench of fish and bodies and fuel, dinghy motors, wines. Sorry, I'm going to start that over. Leaving Libya. I flood my lungs with the wet stench of fish and bodies and fuel, Dingy motor whines against the night. Salt air grinds my skin till it's threadbare, and there's no sitting, leaving Sabrata. Body clenches tight to its bones, and shrill muscles shriek and weep and lock up. Damp t-shirt clings to goose-bumped flesh under a tattered orange life jacket, but what life? Next to me, a shaking woman holds her bony baby and cries. She has shit herself. Behind me, a man mumbles and mumbles for water. His eyes roll hollow, mouth slacks open. From his breath, I smell the thick stink of rot, the gray smell of forgotten humanity. Lights of the Italian coastline appear, and my heart races, vision blurs. From somewhere behind, there's a jolt, yelling, floor tilts, and the lights of Lampedusa go black.
Thank you, Marion.
Great work. Yeah.
So that's a big risk. This poem takes a big swing and a big risk, right? Like the speaker is positioned on a boat with migrants, right? So it's a poem of witness and almost a persona poem, right? Because it like I want to say it's fully a persona poem, right? This person is a migrant, right? And at the same time, it feels like so like sort of describing the predicament of others, right? And bearing witness simultaneously. So it's doing a really complicated thing.
Right. And I don't know what you guys use as the gauge for whether you have the right to do that, or should I also say, I guess both things are things we need to talk about.
Yep.
And how successfully you pull it off, right? So I always feel that to pull it off, one has to talk about it in a way that not anyone could write, if that makes sense. Like to really own that voice, I think is really tricky, but you want to bring up images and specificity that if I gave you all of that as a writing prompt, you're all immigrants, leaving Libya, write a poem, go. Like, images that maybe everybody wouldn't come up with. And what I think she's done well here are the, when she gets to those individuals, there's certain moments too, like salt air grinds my skin till it's threadbare. That's an amazing use of language, an amazing thing to think about. But the two people, the shaking woman and the man who stinks of rot, those individuals I feel are well painted for me. And I'm glad we got two other people as very specific individuals. So not just a ship of immigrants or right, escapees.
Yeah. And it's interesting because to come at this now, right, in 2021, where this has been out of the news for a good 5 years. I mean, this was sort of like such a common sight and occurrence in kind of 2015, 2016, I think even going back to 2014. And I kind of, it's still kind of unfathomable to me. I mean, I know that I listened to a number of news stories in which they had first person accounts of surviving these kinds of crossings. And, it keeps the traumatic sort of seems to be this kind of frequent paradigmatic lens. And the sort of the two pieces of the traumatic, as I understand it, are one, the pieces of the past event that won't stay in the past, but also when the language is not commensurate to the event, that to simply say what happened in no way, shape, or form communicates the gravity of what happened.
Right.
And so I think that the way that this poem moves forward by, kind of a very observational mode, that there's very little interpretive, there's very little metaphorical, there's very little figurative, that it just kind of stays really
concrete.
focused on these like really concrete. I mean, we have a little bit the gray smell of forgotten humanity, but most of it, she has shit herself. This kind of very, very direct explication of what it is that's going on. But I'm a little, my own reaction is to kind of shut down a bit. My own reaction is I'm a little surprised at myself. Like I'm thinking about sort of people who and I think that this is part of why the redaction has become such a popular form, that the erasure poem, with Solmaz Sharif, with Song, with various other, the erasure has become such a dominant mode. My favorite actually is Tracy K. Smith's erasure of the Declaration of Independence, because it leaves out that space, right? That I think that like this poem kind of highlights how the sort of the directness of approach that the redaction avoids or kind of circumvents is often incommensurate to the traumatic in a certain way.
And thinking about it, like, I love that formulation, Jason, right? Like that the erasure is, it's a tool for revelation in a way, and re-narrating, reframing, right?
I know from, I've certainly never gone through anything like this, but I know that my own response to the traumatic is often a silencing. That, like you open your mouth to speak and nothing comes out, because to say it won't help, to say it won't narrate it, that what's happening, that what has happened doesn't match the language one has to speak it. And a lot of this comes from Judith Rose Herman's work, and her idea of healing is narrative. Her idea that when one can make a meaningful narrative, that itself is healing. And so a poem like this could be seen as healing. A poem like this could be seen as a way of giving voice to something that would otherwise be impossible to express.
Right. And I guess that's the thing. I want to tie that comment back to what Kathy said too, about who has the right to speak, right? And are you saying it in a way that is special and commanding, right? And it's this, like, this who has the right to speak in this voice that I keep looping back to as well, because I mean, these are migrants from Libya, right? Seeking asylum elsewhere, right? What's fascinating is this, like, this sort of straightforward use of English, right? There's no vernacular. There's no there's no Arabic in that, right? There's no sense of the accent or the rhetorical attunement of another language pushing through this one. So the poet's not even trying, right, to put on the voice of some of those who are on the boat, right? So
wouldn't that, if she did, wouldn't that be more problematic?
Absolutely. That's what I'm driving at, right? So I think that's what I think one of the strengths of this poem is, that it doesn't do any sort of like appropriation of language or voice. It stays in this sort of descriptive, declarative position without imitating. Right?
Yeah. Because I feel like it sort of directs us. It's a little bit difficult to talk about the ethics of the poem rather than the prosody of the poem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because, like, I was friend of the magazine, Kazim Ali, was talking recently on Facebook about, if you invite him to talk about poems, he's going to talk about breath. He's going to talk about the body. He's going to talk about, like the way in which the poem happens in the body. And here we are kind of like, are we talking about that, or are we talking about something else? Right? Like, are we talking about prosody, or are we talking about, because also the other thing is, like, I feel like that question of the ethical is highly variable dependent on audience. That if this is an audience that has no idea that this happened, then I think it might be an incredibly important poem in order to kind of bring an awareness of a sort of witness, to bring, to make someone aware of something is crucial. But if it's an audience that is aware, is it a co-option of voice? Is it a kind of trauma porn? Is it? I went to a refugee. I went to a lecture on refugees in 2016 at kind of the height of the the visibility of the refugee crisis, from someone who works very specifically on refugee policy. And she said that she will no longer present anything about refugees. She will only present work by the refugees, that she won't use photographs of them. She will only use photographs by them. She will not use text about them. She will only use text by, and of course she's presenting numbers which are about them. Of course she's, presenting a narrative that's based on her own research. But in terms of, like that image of the toddler dead on the shore,
right.
Did that change things? Right? Or did that make everyone who gets the New York Times feel sad over their morning coffee and then go about the rest of their day? I mean, this is a very old problem, and this is Richard Wright, right? I mean, the ending of Native Son is designed so that you don't get to have done the work by feeling sad in the book. That if you can't do the work by feeling sad at the end of the book, then you have to do the work in the world. I mean, this was the complaint about the Passion of the Christ, right? The Mel Gibson movie. That if this is a 3-act revenge film in which the third act isn't there, and it's designed for you to go out and get that revenge in the street, is that something that needs to be tended to? Like, how does one kind of negotiate that? And so I don't know. I mean, I feel like a lot of these questions are, they're very, very important, and yet they kind of, it's like if you read Paisley Rechtel's Appropriation, right, where she doesn't have answers, right? Like, she has meditations, and then in some ways it's a very unsatisfying book because it's placed in your lap, reader, right? Like, you have to reach a conclusion, reader. I'm not here to tell you what to think, but then we're the editors, right? So we have to make this call. We need to have a conversation that reaches a conclusion.
That's right. And listen, the reason I'm leaning on this, right, is it starts with an I, right? I flood my lungs, right? And so it is a first person persona poem in that sense, right? And it is doing this important work of bringing this this refugee story forward, right? And as Jason just pointed out, as editors, we do need to talk about this, right? Like, we are looking at prosody, we are thinking of craft, but we're also thinking of the ethics of it, because in this context, I'm thinking of what was the poem? How to, by I think it's Anders Carlson Wee. Where, right? Loaded vernacular poem.
Oh, yeah. I remember that now.
Right? First person, and the editors had to apologize for publishing it, right? Because its provocations were
right,
problematic.
Well, like Jason said, that we're not going to have an answer. We have to look at how well she did it. That poem got so much because he stepped so heavily on vernacular, right? That was like Kate Winslet's accent in The Mare of Easttown, right? Steps, right. And so that's why it was too much appropriation and not enough honoring of a moment, like this is, could be seen like, and the kindest things we could say is it's awareness building, that it draws an empathetic arc, that it might lead readers to do a little research and read about actually what happened, right. So maybe we do look more at how it's done rather than what it's doing, because Obviously, creatives constantly adopt personas and,
Right.
and bring historical moments to life. And that's what this is attempting, right? Is it attempting it with grace and honor and craft, right? All of those things.
Yeah.
So maybe craft, maybe we should talk more about the craft here ourselves and see if we get led to an answer.
I was just wondering, like, does this poem need to be in first person, or
Did you say, does it need to be?
Yeah, in first person.
Oh, I think to give us this close-up detail, absolutely.
But Alex, I take the question, right? Because it's also like a cinematic eye, right? Like it really feels like I, as movie camera, sort of like bearing witness, right? With those intimate details too, right?
If it were an acrostic poem, say, if it were just, focused on an image of the refugees in one of these inflatable boats built for 5 people that's carrying 40 to the shores of Italy, I think that would aestheticize it. And I think that the approach of the first person, I think, leans into the humanity, but it raises the question of whether one can truly know what it is to be in that experience without being there. And to some extent, we do this all the time. Like, you're allowed to write poems, from the voice of Moses or the voice of Abraham or the voice of, George Washington or, whoever it is, in order to kind of imagine yourself into something. But the ethical stakes get raised if those people are immediate, right? The ethical stakes get raised if those are, to use kind of the Spivakian term, a subaltern, who literally cannot, and when Spivak says when Spivak asks the question, can the subaltern speak? She's not asking if they can talk, she's asking if they can be heard in a mainstream discourse. And so the question becomes, if someone can't be heard, right? If someone is so powerless that they cannot enter mainstream discourse, how does one go about creating that voice? And is it possible?
Right.
I want all my questions open-ended. In the end, we have to vote.
Yeah, we have 2 more poems too. I don't want to rush this. We could always skip one of the other poems, but
exactly. And I can't remember the name of this novel, and I'm embarrassed of it, that I can't remember the name of it, but oh crap, the author was a journalist, and she studied migrant children, refugee children caught in this diaspora and who are traveling alone and on their way to try to get to London, through Greece, through Italy, through Paris, and it's a first person novel, right? So she's a journalist, she does the research, she does a sort of like ethnographic project in talking to numerous children, right? And then creates these characters as composites and then speaks from that point of view, right? And it's interesting, it's just interesting that it is like a function of fiction, right? To do that, right? That it is not only permissible, it's part of the craft, right? Although that backfires sometimes, right? When you're speaking somebody else's story and you have no, right? It's not yours to appropriate, right? Yeah.
I think these are also all, I'm trying to remember who distinguishes between a scandal and a panic. That a panic, do you remember that formulation? But a panic is when sort of, everyone's like really freaked out about something. But a scandal is when there really isn't a way forward. There really are 2 very divided camps. And a lot of the cases that we're talking about, the Carlson Anders Wee, American Dirt, these are really scandals. Like, there really are 2 very strong perspectives, and they really are open-ended. And I don't think that there is a clear consensus that emerged from those from those particular publications. And I think a lot of people would say there is one, and I really disagree. But yeah, do we want to would we want to talk about the other poems that come back to this one, because we're sort of so because we're talking around the poem and we're talking about the circumstances of the poem instead of the poem itself.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, you know what? How about we do this? Let's just do this. Let's just read it a second time. Let's just like get the sound of the poem back in this conversation, right? And then we can, if we want, we can turn to the other two. What do you think about that?
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, get ready. So,
all right, we're ready.
Here we go. So, leaving Libya. I flood my lungs with the wet stench of fish and bodies and fuel. Dinghy motor whines against the night. Salt air grinds my skin till it's threadbare, and there's no sitting since leaving Sabratha. Body clenches tight to its bones, and shrill muscles shriek and weep and lock up. Damp t-shirt clings to goosebumped flesh under a tattered orange life jacket. But what life? Next to me, a shaking woman holds her bony baby and cries. She has shit herself. Behind me, a man mumbles water. His eyes roll hollow, mouth slacks open. From his breath, I smell the thick stink of rot, the gray smell of forgotten humanity. Lights of the Italian coastline appear and my heart races, vision blurs. From somewhere behind, there's a jolt, yelling, floor tilts, and the lights of Lampedusa go black.
I don't know whether I should say this or not, but I'm ready to vote. I am ready to vote.
Me too. Okay, ready?
Okay.
Count it out.
1, 2, 3, vote. Oh my God, that happens. Slushies, after all of that conversation, we are at an impasse. We have an even amount of people here today, and we are at an impasse. So we will have to pass this along to a couple other of our editors, and we'll, by the time we publish this, it'll be up on the show notes, and you'll just have to go look and see.
The drama continues.
Yeah, the drama continues.
Wow.
Man, oh man. Okay. Who would like to read what I learned? We're gonna move on. We spent a lot.
I'll take it. I'll take what I learned.
Okay.
What I learned. I read the weight of the air. Breathe carefully when he's there. Listen to the throbbing silence. I learn his breath smells like mints. His gaze has teeth. When I was little, I hid, barely spoke a word, calculated the tides. I learn to smile and look pretty. If I'm pretty, he won't bother me. Or maybe he will. There are moments of love, speaking gently to me, sharing a joke, a front row seat at my recital. I get confused and think those moments are real and true and claw the sand for more. Learn to hide among the ruins. I look everywhere for my father.
The sound of thinking. I enjoy my father as the final reveal, because we kind of know that I think we get enough hints all along that it is the father. But at the same time, I could see why others would feel a bit too tricked, maybe hoodwinked somehow, or that's like a too, aren't I clever of a move to save my father till the end. But I knew it was the father much earlier than that end, so it did not bother me. I liked it.
I suspected it was a father.
Well, that's a good.
Yeah, I didn't really interpret it as like a final like twist. Because I look everywhere for my father as like there's the version of the father that she experiences, and she believes that there's like a truer my actual dad is like underneath this somehow. Like I didn't interpret that line as like
great.
jazz hands, which is part like kind of reveal of like, it was more of a sad, like somber, like, no, my dad, like, there's still this like kind of naivete of like, this is not really my father. My father's like in there somewhere, as opposed to like, these are the choice, his actions like are a consequences of his choices, like,
Right.
or whatever the story is. I mean, the dad's a drinker in this film, right? Like the mints and everything, like, and the tides. Like, that's at least my interpretation of.
It didn't jump to that, but I see that reading. I thought it was a mercurial man, a man that she was more intimidated and frightened by than felt loved from. But the mints might be.
Yeah, it felt very ominous to me that there was a kind of real version and a fake version, and the bothering and the being pretty to avoid difficulty, but also inviting difficulty.
I like your use of the word ominous there, because that's what this feels like, right? Like waiting for a storm, the weight of the air. Breathe carefully when he's there. Listen to the throbbing silence. It feels like it's always under the surface.
And that line that his gaze has teeth is frightening. That's just great, right? And so I'm thinking a lot about what we were all talking about in the last poem, which is like we're talking about the ethics around the poem rather than the craft of the poem, right? And so I just want to notice this one is very carefully composed as 3-line stanzas,
right?
But the line breaks are challenging, right? Like there are some lines that are single words. There are some stanzas, like the penultimate stanza, each line ends with a conjunction or a preposition, right? Like it's a very like herky-jerky pacing created by those choices. And I wonder what y'all thought about that. Like,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Okay. I don't see, I always, this is one thing I have my students do. If you read the last word of every line, so we've breathed there, throbbing mints, teeth, hid word, tides, pretty me, will, love, joke, recital, which I think is gorgeous, right? That's the theme, that's the essence of the poem. But in the penultimate stanza, it's and for, right? And like you said, it's prepositions at the end, but the beginning, it was really strong, I felt. The last words of each line.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's often a very strong constriction of the breath, that the way in which the if you think about the beginning and the end of the line as stressed positions, which carry like a little bit more weight, and so like which is why it's sort of distressing when you get to the end and it's like and for, because it's the continuation that has no meaning, that has no kind of semantic meaning, that is taking all of the weight. But I think it adds to that sense of the ominous. And so I think that part of what comes through in this poem, which I do think is quite different from the previous poem, is that there's something we don't know that the speaker does. There's something that's being withheld. And as the speaker kind of talks about, looking for the father, that the father is withheld from the speaker, but then there's other things that are withheld from us. And I find that sort of nested withholding really satisfying at the beginning of the poem, but less so at the end of the poem. And like the variation in the line length sometimes got to me, like having a 1-line poem, a 1-word line followed by the longest line in the poem,
right,
followed by a 2-word line. It no longer felt like the line and the phrase were being shaped to each other for me at the end there.
Yeah, I was just reading the penultimate stanza just because I like the idea of it. Like, there's in my head, it's harried, like I get confused and these moments are real and like it's somebody's mind running, but I can also see the argument that like it needs to like build up to that kind of, and jumbled isn't the right word, that kind of harried voice.
Yeah, it's
Like,
more frantic I claw the sand.
Yeah.
Right.
Because everything else before it is like you said, mostly like mostly nouns and like for the most part. And then it kind of hits this moment and then it kind of goes back down again. So yeah.
Do you want to vote?
Yeah.
Okay.
I really have to say though, I love that description, Jason, of like nested withholding, right? Like that is such a great description of part of what makes this poem so compelling, right? Like the way it withholds, and the withholding is happening in so many different ways. Like I think that's a perfect way of speaking of its project, of its ambition, right? And the craft of it. Yeah, nice.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, shoot. No way.
Oh my God. How?
Wow.
Oh my God.
Holy mackerel. That never happened.
This is,
Lorna.
and it's not the same.
Lorna, what are you doing?
Oh my goodness.
Wow, Lorna Rose.
That reaction.
We should announce what happened.
We have tied again. Maybe we should never have an episode where there's 4 of us.
But it's a different tie. It's not the same. It's not the same tie.
And different people have different aesthetics. Yeah.
Okay, that is fascinating. All right, I love this Lorna Rose project. She's really challenging.
What is the limbo episode? The limbo episode. I don't know what we call this. Well, this is poetry, right? This is what right. This is why it takes us so long to get back to people.
That's why it takes us so
Even when we have an editorial meeting, we still can't get to a vote.
You know what though? Like, honest to God, it's like, again, glass half empty, glass half full. I swear, like this is an argument for publishing poems that can split a group like this, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're fascinating and generating this kind of a conversation. All right, let's look at the next one. Let's look at the next one.
Okay, can I do this one?
Yep.
Okay. Surviving the rush. No music plays in the general store in Circle, Alaska, which is full of mucklucks and Wonder Bread. Villagers fish the Yukon, memorize river rise, bet on breakup. Long ago, miners arrived from outside to sift, chip, rip fortunes from earth. Stilts were drilled into permafrost and structures were imposed and all bustle and rage. Then claims fell dry and no patience, and Circle started to wither. The locals picked up pieces of buildings, tried to heal the pock-marked ground. Today, a tourist's crisp dollar might mean something, except the locals would have to tolerate the perfumey tourist. Villagers fish the Yukon, memorize river rise, bet on breakup. The soil smells of fool's gold and blood. So
we should
go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say that the structure is really interesting because it has these 3-line stanzas alternating with kind of single noun or like 1 or 2 phrase lines. So like Wonder Bread, breakup, from earth, rage, wither, pockmarked ground, the perfumey tourist, fool's gold and blood. So like there are these kind of like really emphasized words and phrases that come after a tercet to kind of hold a huge amount of weight.
Right.
In the poem.
Yes.
Sorry,
I was just going to say, and KVM, that was a gorgeous reading. Like the way the poem worked on you to work it, beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Lorna Rose, for giving me those words to say. But all I was interjecting in there is to the slushies again, please remember to take a look at pbqmag.org and see how differently all 3 of these poems are on the page. for sure, even if you stay with us.
So one of the things I really admire about this poem is the kind of like juxtaposition of details, right? So of mucklucks and wonder bread on one hand, right? Betting on the rise of a river, and then, or rather, right, memorize the river rise, bet on line breakup is like gorgeous and forcing me to slow down as a reader in a way that feels like, as Jason said, like the weight is given to those individual lines that takes on a kind of like folkloric quality. That just, I find it really compelling.
I often felt a kind of rhythm that was quite different than the line breaks that were actually offered. Like at the beginning, sort of no music plays in the general store. No music plays in the general store. There's sort of a really nice listening rhythm, but that's actually being pushed back against no music plays in the general store in
Right.
Circle, Alaska. And so I often felt a kind of rhythm that was actually being almost kind of attacked by the line break, that there was something. I mean, I fundamentally believe that the purpose of the line break is to run interference with the syntax, the intonation of the syntax. But here I was often I felt like some of the music was being sacrificed. Villagers fished the Yukon, memorized river rise, bet on breakup, long ago miners. But what we actually get is villagers fished the Yukon, memorized river rise, bet on breakup. And so there's a kind of parsing of the poem that actually kind of like interfered with some of the music for me.
Mm-hmm. Which, I'm sorry, isn't the first line no music plays? Which is kind of funny.
Yeah, no music plays. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
'cause I am like, my 2 points of reference for Alaska are my friend from work who lived most of his life in Alaska, and then somebody who I interviewed who wrote about his like living in Alaska, and he moved to New York. And of course he knows my friend from work because the gay scene in Alaska is very tiny, so they both know each other. I'm like, but the 2 cities of Alaska that I know off the top of my head are like Anchorage and Juneau, which I think I'm pronouncing incorrectly. And those are like South Alaska. They're either like going up the side of Canada.
Do you know Alaska?
No, what do you mean? I said, I know of Alaska. I mean,
oh no, right. The city, like Juneau, is spelled weird, but it's Juneau.
Yeah, did I say it wrong or?
Okay, I think you said Juneau, and I was like trying to figure out what you were. No. I'm sorry. I'm being a dick. I'll shut up.
Needless to say, I don't know much about Alaska, but I know those are either they're along the side of Canada or it's like the south of that big chunk of Alaska. And Circle, like if you look at it, it's like in the middle, like it's like mid mainland, like Alaska. So it's like nothing's there, or except the river or something like that. So like, and I was also like, we're talking about those like single line stanzas, and I'm like trying to get the logic of like why these words break up kind of the music, because it's so like if we just take those out, it's wonderbread, break up, from earth, rage, wither, pockmarked ground, perfumey tourist, fool's gold, and blood. And I'm trying to like kind of get, is there something tying that together? And I don't think I fully found that yet.
Well, listen, I love that you described that they break up the music.
Yeah.
Sorry, because again, you're using the very words of the poem to say what the poem is doing, which is just fascinating, right? Like that is just fascinating. And I guess the thing that I also want to point out too is like to Alex's point about Juneau, right? There's an eco-poetics here, right? Like this like paying attention and description of the relationship between the the villagers and the perfumey tourists it's just again a sort of interesting tension, right? That the speaker is busy describing.
Right.
But the history also starts with minors. There's sort of no
That's true.
earlier. There's no one there when we know there were people there.
But isn't that the point, right? Long ago, miners arrived from outside, right? That they're different from the villagers.
Outside with a capital O.
Oh, are they? I guess I'm reading it wrong then.
Yeah, that's exactly the point, right? That people were already there.
Right, and
then
outside is capitalized.
Yeah.
Do you understand the capitalization? No, I'm sorry. It's consistent in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess outside was just to delineate how outside they are, right? Outside, outsiders.
Right.
Do we want to vote, or do
sorry,
we want
I
to keep
just
talking?
noticed that villagers fish the Yukon, memorize the rise, bet on breakup shows up twice. I didn't catch that the first time.
Yeah.
Except it's different. It's broken up differently.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's these little like pieces that are like, oh, it's doing this and that like, oh, like I'm not sure. Yeah.
Well, Alex, I mean, I think that's one of the things that we sometimes talk about is like, if you look at the poem a second time, third time, is it rewarding the reading, right? Like, does it hold you, and B, does it reward the rereading? And when I listened to Kathy read it, I saw that, right? The villagers fish the Yukon, memorize river rise, bet on breakup is like it's repeated from the top of the poem, but the line breaks sit differently here, right? And the soil smells of line break, fool's golden blood is the sort of mic drop ending, right? But it's reiterating what was said and is in that sort of stilted fashion at the top, which is, for me, it's like that, I don't know, this author is really like being playful with those, with the way it's breaking up the sound, which with the way the music is intentionally stilted. So what do you think? Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
I think we are.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, vote. This is record breaking.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
We have 3 ties and 3 different configurations of ties.
3 ties, and everyone's been a different combination of voters.
Oh my goodness.
That's insane. I pulled my hair out from its roots. Wowzers. That's amazing. I don't think we've ever had that.
That's never happened.
Never have I ever.
Never happened. That's never happened in person. That's there.
Oh, no. And I love that Larissa thinks it's Mercury in retrograde. I think you might be right.
I'm gonna just always make the lemonade, as it were. As Marion said earlier, it's interesting when we're divided like that. And at our last open editorial meeting at Writers Room, which slushies who live locally look, and as hopefully soon we'll be able to throw these open editorial meetings in some other spaces as well. But anyway, we said yes to at least 3 or 4 things, and the vote was very close every time. We did have an odd amount of people, but we had like 7 to 5, 8 to 7. Like, it was so amazing over and over again. Mm-hmm. And there was one poem that everybody was a unanimous yes. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it was just conversation and really close counts every time. And I felt happy that they were going in for exactly the reason that Marion said earlier. Yeah. That instead of always just slam dunks.
Right.
It's kind of interesting, right?
Kath, I have to say, and when you think about this, and Lorna, when you listen to this podcast, right? This is the ambivalence that sits here is a really remarkable, and it speaks to the power of these poems, right? And the fact that we spent an hour sitting with them like they're the only thing that matters, and that they could hold our attention like that is really a remarkable gift, right? To to have shared these with us and let us just sit with them for as long
Yeah,
as
and
we
I
did.
think we would have talked more if it wasn't for the crunch of time, right?
Yeah,
Each
yeah.
one. I think,
Oh, yeah.
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 We're only hurrying along because we need to. And
Right.
speaking of hurrying along, I'm now 5 minutes late for my next. So
Okay.
again, slushies, you will have a result in the notes by now. We'll do something so you'll know. But we don't know. You'll know. We don't know. Time is ribbon candy. And much love. Please tell us how we're doing. And thank you. And keep reading. Woohoo!
Thank you, Lorna Rose. Wow, Lorna Rose.
Thank you, Lorna.
Thank you, Lorna.